Right, should we get going, Anna?
Yeah, great.
Let's do it. So welcome everybody to, I think this is our third or fourth one of these that we've done now.
Yeah.
As you can see, we've gone for a very Christmassy look this time. So this will be the last one of the year as well. Which, I mean, first Christmas as an MP as well. That must feel a bit strange.
Yeah. And already 6 months under my belt. It's amazing.
How does that feel?
Yeah, good. And I think really feel much more confident about how I can best represent the people of Shipley in Parliament. And I've had lots of opportunities now to really start seeing how I can make a difference.
Do you feel like you've been growing into it a bit?
Yeah, it's like any new job. When you first arrive in Parliament, it's very overwhelming, even just finding your way around, never mind getting to grips with all of the historic procedures and figuring out what to do and not to do.
Yeah. And
you make mistakes, of course you do. It's like learning any new job. But so it takes time. Obviously, I had to set up a team and an office here.
Yeah.
So I think we're now really up and running in terms of being able to respond to people and help casework as well. So it's good.
If you had to pick like any one particular highlight from the last 6 months, do you feel like you could pick one?
Oh, quite difficult. But obviously, from the parliamentary side, giving my maiden speech was a very significant moment when you first speak in Parliament. And for me, it was very moving because my mum and dad were in the gallery looking on. So that was a real highlight. But there's been so many wonderful times. I've loved all the visits I've done, particularly to some of the local schools, and some of the great questions from the children. I particularly enjoyed when I recently went to Eldrick Primary School. They'd done a whole project for me and all about RAC and how it affected the school. And I was really touched by the trouble they'd gone to. So yeah,
that was a really good one. So I just thought, I'll kind of wait and see a few more people might join. If you just want to give us a little bit of a rundown of what you've been up to for the last few weeks.
Yeah, so busy time in the run-up to Christmas. The government continuing to deliver on the manifesto, bringing in legislation that was set out in the King's Speech. So I spoke at the introduction of the water bill, so the special measures water bill that's going to crack down on illegal sewage dumping. There's also a private members bill that Sarah Owen MP is bringing forward around fireworks to tighten up the legislation on, banning some of the louder fireworks. So that was great to meet her, chat to her about that and show my support. There's been debates for Disability History Month I've spoken in, talked about Shipley College and also about some of the problems with NHS waiting lists. So quite busy in Parliament, as well as things I've been doing in the constituency.
Yeah, is there any kind of particular thing you're most proud to speak about? I thought your speech at the water bill was particularly very good. And you made a few contributions on fireworks as well.
Yes.
Even before we got to Sarah Owen's bill.
Yes. Yeah, so definitely had lots of opportunities, and I also met with the Ilkley Clean River group. They brought in other campaign groups from around the country, and we hosted, I think, probably 30 or 40 MPs from across different parties to talk about the problem of sewage dumping, which big concern. We've obviously been busy here in the office, haven't we, in the run up to Christmas, getting out Christmas cards. So it was great to meet Mason, who's at Myrtle Park Primary School, who was the winner of the Christmas card competition, and his parents are very proud. And I've made sure this week I've posted, which was partly bringing his wishes, that his Christmas card should go to King Charles. So I've posted Mason's card off today.
Yeah, and we also did an in-person Ask Anna event in Denham a couple of weeks ago. How did you feel that went?
Well, it's great, and there were several of the people who were involved in Collingwood with the campaign around the battery storage. So as a result of meeting them at the Ask Anna event, and that's open to anyone to register as I go round the constituency for those face-to-face meetings, I then did an on-site visit with them next week to see the site of the battery storage and to really understand the concerns that they have around safety, proximity to the landfill site. And whilst I'd looked at it on a map and I know the area, it was really good to meet with them on site after that Ask Anna event. But yeah, it's always great and I'm grateful for people coming along.
Yeah, and just a little note on those Ask Anna events. I believe we do have ones coming up that are going to be in Shipley, and then there's one in Bingley that we've got coming up as well. So if those are something you might be interested in, just keep an eye out, and I'm sure you'll be able to come along if you would like to. So just another note as well, I am watching the live chat, so if anybody does have any questions they want to ask Anna, feel free to put them in, and if we've got a bit of time, we'll definitely get to those. So I guess let's just kind of get into the questions, really.
Happy to.
So when I put out the advert for this, I'd say the vast majority of the questions were about this one issue, which was to do with the bus services to Bingley Grammar School and St Bede's and St Joseph's. So I just picked one of the questions. This was from Matthew Sutcliffe. He said, "Hi Anna, what are you doing and how are you supporting the parents that are trying to save the Bingley Grammar School buses?"
Yeah, so thanks to everybody who's written to me on this issue, and really understand how concerned you must be about how you're going to get your kids to school. So as everybody knows, the context for local government, so paid for by the council, they are looking through literally every figure to see where they can make savings, and they are only under a statutory obligation to arrange travel for a relatively small number of children. So if they look at the numbers per child who they're obliged to transport, it's very, very high cost. But obviously lots of other children are using those buses as a safe way to get to school. And I'm really concerned that the idea that there won't be subsidised buses and children be expected to go on to the commercial buses, when we know that that's a really poor service, particularly from the villages, from any kids coming from Harden, Willesden, Collingworth, out that way. You know, they're not reliable enough to get the kids to school at the moment, and there aren't enough of them. So I'm very much putting across parents' views to the council. I spoke to the leader of the council this week specifically about this issue of the buses. And I know many of you have put into the formal consultation, which was exactly the right thing to do. I think that only closed at midnight.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Last night. So all of those representations that you've made, along with obviously my representation directly to the council, will be looked at over the coming weeks, and there will be a decision on this in the new year. So I'm going to keep up the pressure and make sure that whatever the decision, that we're making sure that children have a safe way to get to school, something that's a reliable means of getting there, and definitely looking at what whether we can keep the buses, or there are some alternatives that would meet the same requirements, but definitely been representing your views very strongly to the council.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of interest in that particular issue, so do feel free to continue to get in touch with us, either that's via email or sending us a comment live here, or dropping more comments on Facebook, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And as soon as we hear anything, obviously we'll be getting back, but I expect it will take a little while for them to look at what some of the consultation responses have been.
Yeah. So moving on to something else that's also been a bit of a hot topic recently. Georgie Hobson asked, have you actually spoken to local farmers regarding the new inheritance tax plans?
Yeah, well, thanks, Georgie. And I think maybe you might be a farmer if you are, or from farming family. Always happy to get invitations. But in the last few weeks, I've been visiting a farm up in Belden and another farm in Collingworth. And what's really clear to me is that, you know, the headlines about the impact this is having are a bit misleading, and I think quite scaremongering. So obviously families that do proper succession planning, my own family have a farm up in Cumbria, and my uncle, you know, handed over in good time to my cousin, and that means that as long as there's a 7-year period between the handing over and the person's death, then they're not going to get any inheritance tax. The fact is that even under the rules, up to 3 million, if there's a couple who are passing on, wouldn't have any inheritance tax, and anything above £3 million would still be at a discounted rate. So actually, from the numbers that have looked at getting this relief in the past, it's actually not going to affect the vast majority of farms. And I think the other thing to remember is that good number of farms in this country, including one that I visited, are tenant farms.
Yeah.
So they don't actually own the land. And there could be opportunities with this change for land to become available for tenants to buy. We've also seen that this land speculation, so one of the things we're trying to stop is people buying up land as a way of avoiding inheritance tax. And again, one of the farmers I spoke to locally had been interested in purchase of a piece of land, but it had actually gone to somebody who just wanted to invest in it as a sort of speculative, and is now renting off those people. So you can see that it's not quite as straightforward, and the main thing that the government were really trying to do was to clamp down on this land speculation for tax avoidance schemes.
Yeah. And again, if you have any further questions, let anybody do, feel free to get in touch.
And the main thing that I've heard talking to farmers is they want to know that the subsidy scheme that the last government brought in, actually it underspent because there were so many hoops that farmers had to go through, and they were very slow in paying out the new subsidies. And so I've been putting pressure on government to make sure that they get that money out the door. And in fact, in the budget, the Chancellor committed to a significant increase in investment over the next 2 years in farming.
Yeah. So moving on to another issue that I know is very close to your heart, as it was one of your big priorities during the campaign. Daniel Aldridge asked, what are you going to do about the state of Shipley and the traffic?
Yeah, well, thanks, Daniel. I'm regularly out and about, sometimes on my bike, sometimes in the car, sometimes on foot, around Shipley, and I certainly think there could be a lot more done to ensure that all road users can move easily, whether that's between the station and the town centre, between Saltaire and the canal. And at the moment, even, you know, that the crossing, it's difficult and takes a lot of time. So I'm pushing that we have a look at whether we can reorganise the flow of traffic and better connect the town centre. But the centre of Shipley is going to get a makeover, and that's going to be starting in February, and we're going to see huge improvements to the market square. We're going to have a new canopy, and I've seen the the images of what that's going to look like, and I think people will be really excited once they see that taking shape. And I'm a member of the Shipley Towns Fund board, and we've had some great projects. Went to the opening of the Kergate Centre and Hive, and also the Cellar Trust are doing an upgrade of their health and wellbeing hub. So there's new projects coming on all the time, which are really helping. And also I visited a lot of small businesses for Small Business Saturday. Yeah. And there's other positive things that we're doing to help retail and the high streets, and tackling antisocial behaviour, for example, being one. Yeah.
So moving on. This one was from Gregory Jessup. He asked, can you lobby to reverse the decision to scrap the planned cap on care costs within adult social care charging reforms, which were due to be implemented in October 2025? I know this is quite a details question, so I just wondered if you could give us a bit of an overview.
Yeah, and I'll try and so thanks for the question, Gregory. So people may know that over a decade ago there was a report looking at how to change the funding of social care. Sadly, at the moment, if you need care and support because of a disability or old age, and you have any savings, including your home, you have to pay for care yourself, and that can mean that you spend even the equity in your home. So there were proposals then, they were legislated by the last government, but they were delayed and delayed and delayed and never implemented. The last delay was till, as was said here, October 2025. But as you know, when Labour came in and looked at the money, there was no money set aside for the implementation of those social care reforms. And actually, social care needs the cash investment just to keep the current services going. So that seemed to be the priority. But what we do have as a Labour government is an ambition that over the next 10 years to build a national care service. And so we are going to see, hopefully next year, the beginnings of building a much better social care system, so that those things will get fixed and people can get the care and support that they need.
Yeah, and I mean, I know this is a huge priority of yours. It's going to be like your area of expertise. It's coming in on social care. You've spoken a lot about it in Parliament.
Yeah, so I'm very happy if Gregory wants to write further, and I can provide a bit more policy detail on Labour's plans.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Anna. So moving on to the next one, this was another big topic. We had quite a few questions on these that were quite similar. So, and it was all about the government's decision this week on the WASPy compensation. So Anna, I'd kind of just wanted to ask you about what your views are on that decision, and what you think was going to happen going forward. And
so again, this is quite a big historical issue. So historically, women got their state pension at 60 and men at 65. But as we're all living longer, variously over time, people have said, well, we need to increase the state pension age for everybody, but also to try and equalise the state pension age between men and women. So that was a decision historically, and during when George Osborne was the Chancellor under the Conservatives, he made a decision to accelerate, i.e. speeding that up. And obviously that meant that some women who thought they were going to get the state pension at 60 suddenly found that they were going to have to wait longer. And that left quite a lot of women in a really difficult position because they didn't get much notice of that. Those decisions were not what this was about. This was about whether the DWP had properly informed women affected by these changes. And so the Ombudsman had done a report, again under the Conservative government, into this administrative issue to ascertain whether some women had not been notified. And it turned out that there had been a couple of years when they stopped sending out the letters, and they took responsibility and said that this was something that DWP did wrong. Yeah. So that was what the compensation was about, and the Ombudsman had proposed compensation which would have cost them 10.5 billion, and actually gone to lots of people who were not actually affected by this sort of failure to give information. And so the government have decided not to pay out that money. Now, I'm very aware, I've campaigned alongside women affected by this, and I appreciate obviously the really difficult financial situation that many women found themselves in, having to suddenly work longer or to make savings stretch till they could draw their state pension. And so I've campaigned heavily that this sort of injustice should have been put right, and I have this week spoken since the announcement to both the Pensions Minister and to the Secretary of State, and expressed sort of my concern that the Ombudsman's recommendations are not being fulfilled, and that at least some women who were affected could perhaps have expected compensation. I'll keep pressing those views, but people can understand that obviously giving money, £10.5 billion out, particularly where some people were unaffected.
Yeah, once again, another one of those very immersive and very complex topics. So if you do have additional questions, please do feel free to get in touch with us. So this next one we're moving on to, this one is to do with parking, which I know is a big issue that a lot of people do bring up. And it's particularly to do with parking on pavements, which I know is a very big issue for a lot of people. It's from Kath Bacon. She said, parking near schools and obstructing the pavements needs tackling, perhaps with something like school streets exclusion zones. Yeah. What would you think about that?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'm very aware as somebody who's campaigned on disability that, it's a really big issue, the parking on pavements. For anybody who has a mobility issue, maybe in a wheelchair, it just makes it impossible to get around. Add to that women with buggies, pretty much anybody trying to use the pavement. So it is a problem. And it is something that there was a consultation on by the Department for Transport, looking at options about how this could be done. In London, it is not permitted to park on pavements. So they have solved the problem in London. And I think there is a plan to come up with sort of a formal response to that consultation to see what could be done. I think the particular issue of school parking, I'm aware of a couple of schools where it's really very dangerous for the children being dropped off and other children trying to walk to school. And I think there have been attempts to do some exclusion zones, but the problem is that you need alternative and safe drop-offs if you're not able to drop off outside the school. And also there are problems of enforcement. So I've been speaking to the local police, encouraging them to do more enforcement action around some of the school exclusion zones that we do have in place. But obviously you need to review the effectiveness of those, and also making sure that parents are encouraged where they can to walk their children to school or use other modes of transport, such as better public transport. If we had it.
Yeah, I know that is a big issue. I mean, even, you know, away from schools, from like a disability access perspective, you know, you'll come across a lot of pavements where you literally couldn't get a wheelchair through.
No.
So
and if you don't have your sight, you know, people with white cane or guide dogs,
and you can end up like having to go into the road.
Into the road, it's very unsafe. Yeah.
So yeah, that is a big issue. So moving on to the next one, which is again about buses, but this time not so much about school buses, more about generally how the new government might try to improve bus access, which I know has become not what it used to be over the last 14 years. So this question comes from Tracy Huddleston. She singled out the 34 bus route, saying it needed improvement, especially on a Sunday. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the government's plans and your priorities when it comes to improving buses.
Yeah. So over the last 14 years, there's been huge cuts to bus services. So we've lost a lot of our rural services, some routes entirely cut, but the regularity of services has really gone, and that just means that it's not reliable. And if it's not reliable, it's really hard to use it for work, use it for school, use it for doctor's appointments if you're worried that you're not going to get there on time. So we definitely need to get our buses running more reliably, more frequently. And that is part of what the Tracy Braben, as our West Yorkshire Mayor, she's taking buses back into public control. And that will mean that instead of private companies making those decisions, we'll be able to have routes that are priority routes, and also subsidise some of the rural or less frequent services from those that run. And we've introduced in government a Better Buses Bill to make that easier for places all over the country to have those same powers. And it'll mean that buses are running again in the service of passengers rather than for profit. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Anna. Moving on, this was a question that we actually just got today, and it is very topical, particularly because of what was going through Parliament last week with the water bill, and then the news yesterday that we heard that water bills for consumers might be going up next year. So Chris Slavin asked, what do you think about the increased water charges? Yeah,
well, Chris, I mean, I think it's scandalous, really, and I spoke about this in Parliament this week, that we've got Yorkshire Water have creamed off, you know, billions really over many years. They haven't made the investments in our infrastructure and continue to dump untreated sewage in our rivers. And now that we're tough, you know, getting tougher and saying, you know, this can't go on, they're putting it all on the consumer bills.
Yeah.
So we really need to, well, that's why the government are introducing the Water Measures Bill. So the other is they're still giving bonus. So the CEO of Yorkshire Water is planning on taking an eye-watering bonus. I can't quite remember the number.
Like 375,000.
Anyway,
like
I think it's I think it's over £300,000 pounds. Which, you know, if anybody, you know, if you don't do a good job, you don't get a bonus. And so I've called that she should be giving back the bonus. And we need longer term to restructure the water sector, and so the government have set up an independent commission to look into that. So at the moment there are two regulators: the Environment Agency, who's responsible for whether the water's, you know, clean in terms of the discharges, and then you've got Ofwat that regulate the sort of market and prices. And I don't think they've been up to the job. So I think as part of this commission, they'll be looking at reforming how the companies are regulated. So, but yes, with the cost of living, you know, the last thing we need is these eye-watering increases in water bills. So I'm with you, Chris.
So we're kind of coming towards the end now. we've just got one more question that we've got, so if anybody else does have any questions they want to ask, please do make sure you get them in the chat now, and maybe we can pick those up. But this last one comes from Sarah Jane, and this one is also to do with how are you going to tackle antisocial behaviour, because we know that has been a big issue that comes up on the door a lot. She was asking, what will you do to make sure the residents of Shipley feel safe?
Yeah, great question. So one of my pledges and the government's pledges was to invest in more neighbourhood police. And I meet regularly with the Bradford police chiefs and local police. And I think it's really important that people feel confident that if, you know, not just when crime happens, that the police are there to respond and arrest as needed, but also this sense that they are out and about in the community and tackling some of the antisocial behaviour around drug dealing and off-road biking. So it's a fantastic project that we have here. I met with the Project Steerside. They are police who are actually out on off-road bikes themselves, so they can chase down some of the illegal off-roaders, and they're also out there seizing these vehicles at source, which is really, really critical. And there's also more that we need to be doing at a national level to really cut out some of these illegal e-scooters and other things that are being used in a very dangerous way around our communities. So these are all the sorts of things that we need to do to hopefully not only make people feel safer, but make sure people are safe in our communities.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Anna. That is the end of the questions that we have prepared. So if anybody else does have any questions they want to ask, I guess this is kind of like last call to try and get them in. But thank you very much, Anna, for all your answers.
No, and I'd probably just like to wish everybody a happy Christmas.
Yeah, definitely.
If we're at that stage in the proceedings. And just say thank you for all your support and contacting me since I was elected in the summer. It's been fantastic to represent you in Parliament, and great to see that many of the issues that you care about are things that the Labour government have already begun to address, or at least have plans for how we will address in the coming months.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us. And if you do have any more questions or feel like you want more detail on your answers, you can always get in touch with us at anna.dixon.mp@parliament.uk. And yeah, thank you very much.
Happy Christmas.